This is going to be 5 stories with Will and Pete. And I've already put him into a box because I've showed up, not just in a T-shirt, but a T-shirt that's a gift from Pete Hegseth. And he's over there in some kind of button down and poor lighting.
Frumpy, poor lighting. And you have that's the second gift I've given you, Will. That don't forget my Bitcoin gift, which has only gone down since I gave it to you, but it's going to rebound. And I got you that T-shirt for free. So far I've spent almost nothing on you, but I love you.
You got me that Bitcoin at Christmas time, just out of curiosity, because I'll be honest with you, I haven't kept up with the market swings of Bitcoin. Where am I today? What percentage am I down on Bitcoin?
I paid $50 for it. You're about break even. Let me check it right now. See, you don't even control your own Bitcoin, Will. I have it on my wallet here, so I technically still hold your $50. And I'll keep you posted on your holdings in the Bank of Pete. Right now, your holding is it's at $38. So you're already down $12. Yeah, you got a ways to go.
Down $12.
I bought high. That's usually what I do with my investments. I like to buy high and sell low. That's that's how I approach things.
Well, the good thing for you is I have no idea what you said. Bitcoin wallet, you're in control. It sounds like Fox and Friends. I have no idea. So consider the $50 still yours. Let's rock and roll. Okay, story number 1, state of play, state of war. We are roughly, I believe, in day 7 or 8 of the Russian-Ukrainian war. Where do you think we are today, Pete?
Great question. You know what I would encourage people to do, and I mean this seriously, not just because we all are a part of Fox Nation. Check out the documentaries on the Russian military and who is Vladimir Putin. I think it's and anything around this to get inside the mind of Vladimir Putin gives everyone watching and everyone listening more of an understanding of why someone like him would do what he's doing in the 21st century in 2022 in a sovereign state. We may be dealing with somewhat of a rational actor, but a rational actor with increasing ambitions, increasing paranoias, and his own narrative over the last 20 years, at least longer than that, about what the world has been doing to him, and therefore what he believes he must do to preserve his own power and expand his orbit of influence. So yes, we're 8 days in right now. The bombardment continues. He's making progress on the ground. There's no doubt about that. There's one little news nugget that I just saw 30 minutes ago. There's open admission now amongst those who have access to, the Gang of 8 that has access to more intelligence than regular members of Congress. They're talking about the extent to which we're giving real-time intelligence to the Ukrainians, meaning the Americans giving real-time intelligence to the Ukrainians, which would lead to potentially real-time targets, meaning here's a Russian column, here's a Russian formation, hit it with the weapons you have or weapons we've supplied. In the mind of Vladimir, and this is not being a Vladimir Putin apologist, this is just understanding the way he views the world. In the mind of Vladimir Putin, any real-time American involvement in the war, we're already sending javelins and stingers, is a major escalation in his mind. And I think that's got to be a huge factor in the minds of our leaders right now. As he takes terrain around Ukraine, what are the thresholds we could pass that in his mind has made this the inevitable conflict between the Russians and the Americans that he was going to lead because they've always been under threat from us. And so those of us who stand with Ukraine and want to see Zelensky and others fight like hell, you got to have an eye toward how this thing could spiral quickly, not because he thinks he's going to plunk through a bunch of NATO countries, but because his perception of threat could lead to some what we view as irrational actions that he thinks make perfect sense because he's being surrounded by NATO and the Americans. So it's a pitched battle. I remain cynical, unfortunately, about what the Ukrainians are going to be capable of doing in the long haul. Just so much military might from the Russians. Yes, we might be seeing cracks in the morale. Certainly we've seen cracks in the supply lines. But if they can consolidate the Black Sea, start to connect areas that they control, largely avoid city centers. They don't want to go house to house, but demoralize populations, and encircle Zelensky, that gets to a point where they if they wanted to, extract concessions that they could justify as a win.
So I wanted to share with you a couple of things I've picked up over the last couple of episodes of the Cain Podcast. I've spoken to a Heritage Foundation and former CIA director. In a previous episode, I've talked to Jason Castillo, who's a professor at Texas A&M University for the Bush School of Game Theory. And here's what I see. Here we are a week into this war, Pete, and I want to see what you think. First of all, I think we were way too quick to say, wow, Russia's having a lot of trouble. First of all, 2 or 3 days. Castillo told me not every war is Operation whatever it was, Iraqi freedom. Not every war storms through the desert in 2 or 3 days, and not every enemy is Saddam Hussein who throws down his weapons and runs. So the fact that we had some expectation the Russian military would conquer Ukraine in 3 days is really our overestimation, not an underestimation
I agree.
Of Vladimir Putin. And then the second thing I've been paying attention to is, as you and I over the last week have been at the maps at various times at Fox News, I don't think it is inconsequential that he turns Ukraine into a landlocked nation. I believe all that's left, Pete, is Odessa, and then he cuts off as a major city center, and then he cuts off Ukraine from the Black Sea. And I talked about this in my last episode because I do think one of his goals, as we try to climb inside of his mind, is to take charge of every bit of Ukrainian energy, all of the oil deposits that have been found in the Black Sea. And I don't think he ever wants to give those back. Whatever the off-ramp is in this war, whatever it looks like, if there's something short of full-on occupation of Ukraine, I don't think he ever gives those back. I think he keeps that oil. I think he keeps that sea access. And then the last thing I'd say is, you said you don't want to sound like a Vladimir Putin apologist. I think that's a weird thing we're all doing right now. I don't blame you. I don't blame you. But we're all sort of laying that caveat. And you got on me. I believe you used to say we shouldn't have to say whether or not we're vaccinated before every conversation about whether or not the vaccine is effective. We shouldn't have to say, hey, look, I'm not a Vladimir Putin apologist before we say, you know what? It'd be smart to climb into the mind of your enemy. It'd be smart to see what's making him tick. And I find it weird that the only holdouts, Pete, they're not even holdouts. The only people willing to do that are on the right. Because every other media organization and everybody along the political spectrum, left and right, are really coalescing behind a march, it seems, towards World War III. And the only people tapping the brakes, it's not the entirety of the right, but the only people tapping the brakes seem to be, weirdly, on the right.
You're exactly right. By the way, based on that, I hereby retire use of the phrase, I don't want to seem like a Vladimir Putin apologist. You're right. It's unnecessary. So consider it retired here on the Cain Podcast. It's easy to be a war hawk at the beginning for everybody, left and right. Yes. Everyone wants to look tough. Vladimir Putin has become a caricature. He's become an easy punching bag, especially amongst folks on the left who are always being told they're too weak on any particular enemy. So when they find an easy target to be strong on, they go all in. If you're fair about the consequences of American foreign policy, especially over the last 2 decades, you would not be forgiven for stepping back and saying, hold on a second. We ought understand the enemy we're facing, his intentions, his view of us, his capabilities, and that our actions, not that we're to blame, but our actions bear on the actions that he takes, which is why when people said, hey, why wouldn't we consider maybe saying, hey, Ukraine won't be a NATO member. It'll permanently be a state that has a relationship with NATO or has a relationship with the EU, and as a result is a buffer that not placates, that's the wrong word, but acknowledges the threats that Vladimir Putin believes he has and avoids World War III. Those are legitimate conversations to be had that don't make you an apologist. I think you're right, and I'll say it again. It's so easy to be hawkish at the beginning. We all get caught up in it. I don't know if you feel this way, but even doing Fox and Friends over the course of 3 or 4 hours, by the 7th or 8th, or by the 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock hour, you find yourself almost saying, well, why aren't we doing more? Why couldn't we do more? What about this? And what about it's almost a natural gravitation to say, we are the world superpower. We have these capabilities. Why don't we employ them while we see women and children being bombed in cities that look like Western cities with a very articulate, courageous president there fighting for his people? It's a natural instinct. But we also, because we are the world superpower, have a responsibility to think about the reverberating effect of our actions. And in this case, the question we have to ask ourselves is, do we want to trigger a potential World War III over the country of Ukraine? And that is not dismissing Ukraine. That is recognizing it could spill dangerously if we don't take the right actions right now.
All right, story number 2. Why are our leaders so weird?
I saw it right away. I was watching it, Will. I wish I could unsee the whole thing. I wanted to go to bed, but I felt like I had to watch it. And the moment, and I know this because I've been involved in vets issues for so long, the moment the word veteran came out of Joe Biden's mouth, Nancy Pelosi jumped up like a rocket. She was like, oh, yeah, I'm going to prove how much I love the troops. And then it wasn't the applause line, so it was, I'm going to sit here, and now I can't give it up. And then after 4 or 5 seconds, they went down here, and then once the vets came back, it was up here. And it's actually, I'll riff on this for a second, then we'll get back to it. It's so condescending to vets. It's folks like Nancy Pelosi that find the big, easy causes to give away money that don't usually improve the lives of vets, and they clap and clap and clap for their own political gain. And I'm sick of it, and I can't stand it. But they're bad actors. You know, they're like Chuck Schumer. He knows when he's supposed to clap, but he's trying to read the room. But it's like it's a nursing home. So half the room's asleep and not really paying attention, so there's no room to read. It was awkward.
Okay, I have a couple of thoughts as well. As weird as that moment was,
I welcome yours.
Not as weird, but almost as weird as that moment was of Nancy Pelosi fist clenching, rubbing during a mention of toxic burn
fist
pits.
Grinding.
Was her sucking her dentures the entire State of the Union. And let me just tell you something. I'm not being mean. This isn't about being ageist. But you do have to pay attention to the fact that, A, for some reason, all of our leaders happen to be octogenarians. And B, they're not normal octogenarians. So here's my theory, okay? And I think that this is good to put it to you a little bit.
Are you saying they all have a lot of work? They're not normal octogenarians? They got a lot of work done.
There's that, but no, I'm saying they're not normal in the sense of, well, like everyone else. Here's what I mean. Okay, you remember the theater dude in high school? Like, here's the thing. I don't have anything against the theater dude. In the theater dude, there was some cool theater dudes, but the theater dude was a different dude. And so when you know that guy in high school, everybody goes, Brad, he's in drama. And you're like, oh, yeah, who goes into drama, right? But then when Brad turns into Brad Pitt, we just think he's normal and cool. But we discount the fact that way back in high school, he was the drama dude. And, that wasn't a normal dude to be. I also think, I do think this. I think that the people that go all in on politics as a career just simply aren't like everyone else. They may have started when they were in high school. Now and this is why I'm putting it to you, because I do think you got interested in politics as a formal mechanism, maybe earlier than I did. But and by the way, you're a normal dude. That's why we hit it off, whether or not it's competing on Fox and Friends or having a drink on one of our road trips. I think you're an outlier. So it's not that all drama dudes are weird or all political dudes are weird, but I think that maybe all the ones that make their way to Washington, D.C., there's some kind of filtering mechanism, and by the time they get there, they're all weird.
You got to be a special type to love yourself so much. I mean, there's a reason they call it the nerd prom. For a reason.
Yes.
What is that? I think that's the correspondence dinner or whatever it is the nerd prom, because these are, and you know what? I think I avoided it, Will. I'll be honest. Because if you met me, when we first met was 10 years ago, there's a strand of ambition which leads to a hyper sensitivity to what people think about you, and hypersensitive to the things you say and how they're received and how people receive what you're saying, not who you really are. When you're a young age, if you haven't really become comfortable in your skin yet, that drives you into politics, and suddenly you are a chameleon for life, and you're in the game, playing the game. I got shellacked 10 years ago running for the Senate when I ran, and I thank God every day that I did. I mean that. I got absolutely crushed. I got embarrassed. And I was not yet at a place where I didn't care what other people thought. And I think the only way to get into politics is to be in that place where you can truly be yourself. Those are the most effective politicians there aren't many of them, having been on the Hill a lot. I've been on the Hill. I mean, for years and years, we would do Vets on the Hill days where you'd go meet all these members of Congress. And most of them are super guarded. They don't know you. They don't trust you, except when the cameras come in and there's smiles and handshakes and everything. They know how to do that part, but they're not just normal dudes. And some of the normal dudes are effective, and then some of the normal dudes get in trouble. So I will leave it there. I have some stories I could tell. But Not for here. Not for here.
Well, that's going to be a green room conversation on Saturday morning.
Yes.
And by the way, I don't doubt that you're right. And I think it's I've told you this before, and I used to talk to guys at ESPN about this. I happen to hit it off with normal dudes, and I don't know how to define that in any other way. And at ESPN, I had an experience. I had the experience.
Go ahead.
Of saying it didn't matter if you were black or if you were white, or truthfully, if you were a pro athlete or you never were a pro athlete. Like, Damian Woody and I hit it off because we're normal dudes. Marcus Spears and I hit it off at the time because we're normal dudes. So did Ryan Russillo and I because we're normal dudes. And the interaction that we had would be the same interaction that we would have if we were sitting at a bar. And I think that's kind of why you and I hit it off as well. Yeah, we have a shared common set of values and other things. But bottom line, you can boil it down to, I kind of think, without a better definition, just a normal dude.
Yeah, you've lived maybe a real life, experienced real things, don't think you're the center of the universe. When you walk into a room, you're not immediately scanning for the person who's a little bit more important and should be talked to instead of the person that you're looking at, which is a huge I'm not going to name names, but I can list the politicians, many of which are quite prominent, who you meet and they're immediately looking past you if you're not important enough for them. And do you have the ability to talk about anything other than politics and your own political life? And a lot, or I'm sure it's the same in sports, and I'm sure it's the same in TV. It's always about TV and what's in the news and what's in your rundown. It's like, well, can we talk about drinking beer and sports and
No, it's the opposite, to be honest. I wish political guys could talk about more things than politics, and I wish sports guys would stop talking politics and just talk sports. So it's a little bit of the opposite. Right. And last point on this before we move on. It's true. It's not partisan. It was partisan perhaps on Tuesday night, but let me just tell you, it's not uniquely Democratic that they're all so weird. They happen to exist on the right as well as the left. All right, story number 3. Back to Ukraine.
Yes, they do.
Vladimir Putin's ambitions. You brought it up. Okay, first of all, I want to tie back into that conversation we were having. And you talked about how we can get swept up. And I think you're so right on that. And look, I've always had a contrarian instinct to whatever I'm doing or thinking, but it's only heightened when it comes to war. And it's not that I don't want to be Neville Chamberlain, and I'm not downplaying who Vladimir Putin might be. I'm simply saying what serves America first. If you invade Texas, I can promise you're going to have a war of hell on your hands. If you affect my family and my country, we will fight. But first, leaders of the United States of America convince me this is my fight. And so I think we can get swept up. I watch people get swept up. Pete, I remember when I was at CNN, I saw cops get swept up, cops that would come on TV and turn into pundits. New York City detectives get swept up in the guilt of George Zimmerman when they knew nothing about the facts. They knew nothing about reasonable doubt. But it's because their brains are wired to close the book on somebody, to throw handcuffs on somebody. They easily get swept up into the moment. And I think that when we approach war, we look at leaders. We have military generals. We have people whose careers are defined by being professional war winners. Whether or not they're successful or not, that's what they are. And so they see things through the prism of war. And I think there's value in being contrarian in that moment. Because as you pointed out earlier, we all look up 20 years down the road from Afghanistan and go, hey, we never really even knew what the goal was, much less what a win looked like. And I think we should be asking those questions at the outset. So I say at the outset, what is Vladimir Putin's ambition?
You're right. By the way, there aren't a whole lot of generals who are professional war winners these days. They're most professional war losers. And we should consider that when we consider their punditry. And I say that as someone who's a contributor to that. I also come at this from a recovering neoconservative, a recovering neocon. You grow up in the age in which you were in war and came home from war, and your views are shaped by those who are advocates of that war. And neoconservatives are premised on the idea that you can use military force to induce freedom in the hearts and minds of others, and that freedom will spawn as a result. And then that ran headlong into the reality of the places we fought, and all the people who sold those theories are in Washington, D.C. in think tanks, and the rest of us are in boots trying to get a goat farmer in Afghanistan to respect justice and human rights. It's just you look around and people go, this is an absolute joke. The interpreters are snuggling, and the army is not fighting. This is not going to work. It's not going to work. So I do. Hopefully, we have of age, but you're still seeing a divergence on this in commentary too. You've got plenty of guys coming out of Iraq and Afghanistan, or commentators on the right, vet or not vet, who are still shaped in this idea that hammer meets nail. American force is might is right, and we want to be strong, and we don't want to be Neville Chamberlain, so we need to react with maximum force. And there's merit to be said about deterrence. And and you and I both have that instinct to understand that strength is really important.
Yes.
But then there are a lot of us also who come at it with that instinct, who say, or maybe we're walking right into the conflict that Vladimir Putin wants or believes is inevitable based on the actions that he thinks we will take, and we are about to take them. And if we take them, we induce a set of cascading things that, Vladimir Putin doesn't care how many Russians die. Eventually that will affect him, and that'll affect, but his grip of support, at least for now, is strong. It's not something where it's in the appetite of the American people right now to send kids to the Baltics to go fight to protect the eastern portion of NATO's flank when Europe won't do it for themselves. And you look back on the infrastructure of the post-World War II setup that we created, it was never predicated on America defends you forever. And so if this is Canada or Mexico, we're having a whole different conversation. But if this is on Germany's border and France and UK and others should be dealing with it, and they're not contributing and they're not capable, is that really our fault?
Right.
Especially after Donald Trump scolded them for 4 years. Is it really our fault? It may affect us, and we know that, but we should be pointing a finger in their chest first before determining, whether we should mobilize the 101st Airborne.
We're led by children. If your solution right now to energy independence, which is national security, is to focus more on renewables, then I don't have grave concerns. I have grave conclusions about your ability to lead. And you and our fellow co-host,
I like that,
Rachel Campos-Duffy, have called this the Green New Deal war. But I want to set that aside for one moment. So, because there's a couple conversations we have floating here in story number 3. You said this in story number 1. You said, we want to use these toys. Can I just tell you a quick story? I was working at CNN, and I was working on a show that was first called Parker Spitzer and then was called In the Arena. And I was on that show every night with the former governor of New York, Eliot Spitzer. And in that time, I think I really got a view into the mindset of a politician. And he said a line during the Libyan war. You remember when we were taking out Muammar Gaddafi. And, I was playing, honestly, a similar role that I am today, which is not dove. It is not, we don't go to war. We should not be there. We should not respond with strength. It is, maybe we should at least coldly calculate our decisions because we're setting off a series of chain reactions. And I looked across the Arab Spring, Pete, and we'd already seen what happened in Afghanistan. And I asked the rational question of, what comes after Gaddafi? Right? I think it's a very legitimate question because we saw in Iraq, ISIS comes after Saddam Hussein. And his response to me was this: what's the point in having all these toys if we never use them? And I tell you, Pete, my blood ran cold because, and by the way, Eliot Spitzer is an incredibly smart person, But in that moment of war, as you start to empower and the train is leaving the station, I think this is the mindset that takes over. And I just think there's so much value in saying, what is Vladimir Putin's ambition and how does it affect the American interest? So I almost interrupted you a moment ago and I said, we will get involved if it clearly affects America. But I have some friends that are telling me we're already there. The train is leaving the station. We're on the escalator to war. Vladimir Putin is talking about nukes. And whether or not he wants to go into the Baltics or go into Poland after this, I don't know, but he is not afraid to escalate this to create a win for Vladimir Putin. And that's going to take us,
for sure,
to stop it.
And we can talk about it all we want. We're reduced at this point to punditry. It's the Joe Biden White House which is making these calls, and it's the Joe Biden White House that Vladimir Putin is calculating against. And to go back to that Jen Psaki clip, it's fundamentally unserious. It's so vapid, it's barely worth responding to. Yet Vladimir Putin considers himself a student of that vapid West. I mean, he's effectively making an argument in a different way that Osama bin Laden made, that the West is a paper tiger, that we're decadent, that we're weak, that we're self-loathing, that we've lost our faith, we've lost our families, and we're at war with each other, and as a result are inherently weak and a less effective system, and he's calculating against that. But what he also knows is that our instinct to punch quickly and punch hard is there. I mean, our defense industrial complex is a real thing. There's no way our committees and our Pentagon and our agencies are going to be able to resist the temptation to further incrementally increase, especially because this White House can't do anything on energy because they're in a box of their own making. I mean, Rachel coined the term. I just use it now. We cite her on it. Our obsession with the climate is a absolute laughingstock to the Chinese and to the Russians. They laugh at it because it makes no sense. They can emit all they want, and we reduce ourselves. They get stronger, and we get weaker, and then they sell us oil at higher prices and enrich themselves. It's insane. They believe the West is in a vulnerable position because the West is eroding from within, and we have our own arguments about that. But that does embolden him to make moves right now. It's a real thing when he's moving during Democrat administrations, because nothing happened in 2008. Nothing happened in 2014. He's seeing something happen now, but he thinks it's worth the cost.
Did you ever lose your mind during COVID? You're the guy, notoriously, who doesn't wash his hands. You are the guy who I once, and I don't know how many viewers and listeners know this, but once when we first were friends in our first iteration, the Blaze days, we were way ahead of life survival stuff at the Blaze. Now they're everywhere. We had a life straw, right? We were going to advertise for life straws, which is a straw that you supposedly can stick into some like dirty river, in Africa and suck up, all types of amoebas and parasites. And you're going to be fine because the life straw filters it out. And I was like, no way. And I said, let's take this outside, Pete. You're like, I'll try it. I'll do it. It works. And I'm like, okay. So we went out onto, I believe it was like 2nd Avenue or what, I don't know. It was on the east side of New York. And
I remember, I can see it in my mind's eye right now. It was 2nd Avenue on the east side of New York, and you picked the grossest green garbage can sludge coming out the bottom of one of those New York City garbage cans in the gutter,
yes,
laying in a pool with a green film on top of it.
The old school New York City trash cans that were graded. So like people throw in coffee, they threw in the milk, they threw in whatever, and then just regular garbage. And all the juices would just leak out, and there was nothing to catch it because all that garbage can caught was essentially solids. There was no bag. And so all that stuff dripped and flowed to the bottom of the New York City graded trash can and then hit the street and rolled off into the gutter. And I said, Hegseth, life straw right there. And you did it. You took that life straw and sucked.
And I'm here to live another day. And my immunity improved as a result. I forgot about that.
Terrible.
Right. We got to find that tape. I'll tell you this. I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but I never did have a freak out moment about COVID. I mean, I think we all had like a little moment of like, oh, could this be like really, really bad? Like we're talking, tens of millions. If you catch it, you've got a 50% chance of surviving, and it doesn't matter what your age is, and it doesn't matter what your health status is. Like, of course, we all had that immediate thought. But then as the information actually came in fairly quickly about who is most susceptible to it.
Right.
And I mean, I remember I said something that got me in trouble at the time, which I stand by to this day, which is it was like 2 or 3 weeks in. I said, the more I understand about this virus, the less worried I am, which was true. The more we understood about it incrementally, even the initial senses, the more we were able to say, okay, here's how you can sensibly respond. I mean, I know other people did. I'm not trying to pat myself on the back. It was just never – I mean, I did get a giant anthrax injection from the military before I went to Iraq that I'm sure wasn't approved. So I feel good.
Well, I give you credit. You should pat yourself on the back. It was this term has come out. It's called mass formation psychosis. Robert Malone talked about it when it came to COVID. You got to be careful when it comes to Ukraine as well. It's just when we herd mentality move in certain directions, and it takes backbone not to. I'll tell you, I was the first month, I mean, I didn't want to touch, doorknobs or whatever it was until they told us it didn't live on surfaces. And I was nervous. I wasn't masking up because that wasn't even a thing yet, and I'd left New York City by the time that became a thing. You're right. But I was scared. I remember I opened my apartment door in New York City, and there was a dude in a full hazmat suit with a gun, like a ray gun. He had a ray gun, Pete, and he was shooting the walls like this. And I looked at my wife. I said, we're out. We're leaving New York City. I mean, but here, okay, so back to your question, how many people?
We didn't know.
This is my thought about the people singing this song. I actually feel sorry for these people because I think these are the true zombies left after the apocalypse. I think these are the rats left on the ship after it's been docked and everyone else has died. In other words, these are the people that are victims. They're suffering from a mental condition. They've been sold fear paranoia for 2 years. They never read the data. They never did what I did and come around. They never did what you did and ask skeptical questions from the beginning. They just ate up the fear paranoia for 2 years. And the the authoritarians like, governors, or mayors or Fauci's, they got their power. They won out of the game. The virtue signalers have moved on to something else, weirdly. Often a Ukrainian flag in their hashtag or in their bio. They'll move on. Mm-hmm. But the people they leave behind are the ones with a real mental condition who are singing songs about masks. I actually feel bad for these people.
I do too, but you know what? It's like Bitcoin. I don't care when you convert, just convert. You know what I mean? It's not about being right. It's not about being right first. I mean, it is nice if you got into Bitcoin at 5 or you knew it from the beginning. But as long as people can come out of it and they could say, okay, I was afraid for 4 months or I was afraid for a year or it took me a year and a half. Can you unwind that psychosis? And these people appear to be still on the path to recovery. Well, maybe never.
That's nice of you. You're the guy that gets into the band before everybody else, but welcomes the others along. You're not like I was into Green Day way before everybody else. You don't have to be the first. You're glad to welcome everybody else in.
It's a flaw of mine. If you crossed me today, I don't know if this is good or bad. If you crossed me today, I would be mad for a little bit, and then 6 months from now, I'd forget that it happened.
Would you really? That surprises me.
I have
about
a
you.
fair. I mean, there's a small list of people. I mean, I just small things. I forget a lot. Maybe that's what it is. I just have a bad memory, and so it benefits in my personal relationships.
I think you're an all-in or all-out guy, and I've wondered, if you're out, you're out with Hegseth. But you think you can come back into the fold. If I do you wrong, I still have an opportunity to get back in the fold.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, it depends on what the wrong is, but I think of former employees I had in certain organizations who I fired in dramatic fashion because they stole money from the company or something, and I'm like, that guy, and then 3 years later they come back and send me an email or whatever, hey, I'd like to, and I'm like, hey, what's up, man? How you doing? I don't know. And someone would be like, you remember what he did, right? And I'm like, yeah, but hopefully he's over it, and we can move on. But in the political sense, longer memory, I would say.
All right, story number 5. We'll do this one quickly. China. I think it's the story we need to be talking about more and paying attention to. And whether or not it is Taiwan, maybe it will be Taiwan. Maybe they're watching what's happening with Ukraine and Russia and watching how the world responds. And maybe at some point in the fall or a year from now, they make their move on Taiwan. But I'm worried, Pete. I think this is where we need to be putting more focus.
I agree, and I think the thought exercise, so I'm sure we'll talk about it on the show too, is watching all these companies jump out and say we're going to unilaterally sanction or stop doing business in Russia, and look at how great we are.
Yes.
We're universally taking would they do that with China?
We know the answer.
If China did something similar, we know the answer. So to me, I almost look at all this stuff and we're rah-rahing about it. I'm like, yeah, this is
what is all this stuff? I saw Disney.
You showed up in the JV.
Disney
game.
Took down the movie Anastasia off Disney Plus. There's been other things I can't remember how many companies have said really superficial stuff, right? We're not silly stuff. We're not going to be doing this because I know Russia's been banned from the World Cup. I believe Russian athletes across the world are now starting to have trouble competing in their competitions. But yeah, you're right. If China invades Taiwan, does the NBA cut business ties? Does Disney cut business ties?
No. And I think China probably knows that, so they're looking at a lot of the condemnation. It's also they would say they can lay more of a claim to Taiwan than Russia can to Ukraine, is what China would say. They also feel like the strategic ambiguity that is the relationship over Taiwan gives them the space. So I agree. Now would be the time they might move. The Chinese tend to be a little bit more patient. Vladimir Putin's in a hurry, and he has been increasingly over the last 15 years. I mean, Xi Jinping's not a young guy either. Say what you want about succession and the Communist Party. When he's alive and not under the dirt, he wants to see things happen. This would be the time. And how would we react to a multi-front war? And we're already seeing this administration say, okay, if we don't buy gas from Russia, we'll just buy it from the Iranians. Like, again, back to the fundamentally unserious part of it and how this could cascade quickly.
Okay, this was serious, and this was also fun. Let's do this again. Deal?
Let's do it again. But I'm wearing a T-shirt next time. I feel like the loser drama kid. Okay, that's what I feel like right now. And you're the cool sports kid.
You're not that guy.
You know,
and you're the loser political kid.
This is a nice red chair that you gave me, but it's got me sitting back. Yeah, I am. As always, it goes back to it. Will's the cool guy. He's in sports. You know, he's got the cool outfits, and I'm just the political nerd guy. I should have
Don't try that stuff. I know what the audience thinks of you and what the audience thinks of me. I see the crowds. Don't worry. All right, man. Oh, yeah. I'll see you next time.